Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are back in War Thunder and we are looking at the A.33 Heavy Assault Tank Excelsior, which is a Tier 3 battle rating 4.0 British premium heavy tank that you got by doing the challenges, the War Thunder Chronicles. You had to get 11 stages, and luckily for me, I was able to take the time to do them. So, what do I think about the Excelsior? If you want a very quick TLDW, I'm pleasantly surprised by the Excelsior. It actually was given to me yesterday, and it started out at 4.3, and I thought that was an okay BR looking at its stats. If you look at its armor, unfortunately, the armor isn't great when we look at the front of it, with 115 on the turret. Most guns at 4.3 that you're going to face, mainly German guns, when it comes to that long-barreled 75, will go through that. But against the Russians, you actually don't have that much of a bad time. Against the Japanese, with their long-barreled 75s, they will go through you as well. So unfortunately, even though this is a heavy tank touted to take over the Churchill Mark III, at the time, the armor doesn't really do a lot. But overnight, they decided to bump it down by 0.3, so it's actually at a battle rating of 4.0. And I don't think it should be there. I think it should be at 4.3. This is a clear upgrade over the Churchill Mark III, and we'll go through the reasons now. So first of all, it gets the 75mm, which has more penetration than the Churchill Mark III. The only thing that the Churchill Mark III has over it when it comes to the 57 is it has a slightly quicker reload. But generally, you're actually going to bounce more shots in the Excelsior than in the Mark III. The Mark III has terrible armor for its tier, where the Excelsior has definitely better armor. If you want a quick description of the Excelsior, what you run into is an up-armored Cromwell. I find it very hard to actually describe this thing as a heavy tank, because it doesn't really act like a heavy tank in the common sense of it. It has ridiculous acceleration for what it is. This thing has the same engine, at least horsepower-wise and RPM-wise, as the Cromwell that we have in game, 600 horsepower and 2,550 RPM. It sits at 40 tons, which is just less than the Churchill Mark VII, but it is just more than the Churchill Mark III. The Cromwell Mark I sits at 27 tons, so it's 13 tons heavier than this, but the acceleration of this tank going forwards is absolutely insane. It is amazing. It has a top speed of 39 kilometers an hour. I haven't been able to hit it, but getting up to 38 kilometers an hour, you seem to do incredibly quickly. So, you don't have to really worry about speed in this thing going forward. It is the first heavy tank that Britain has, which actually has a bit of speed behind it. It has a bit of maneuverability. It has turret traverse. It has wide tracks. It has spaced armor on the sides of it. It can soak shots, apart from on its turret, which is why I worry about its longevity of being good, because people will just figure out where to shoot it. Now, looking at it compared to the Churchills, I actually think it's a much better tank. It is nimble, as I said, can get up to 38 kilometers an hour, has the same gun as the Mark VII, exactly the same ammo. Unfortunately, it only gets 35 rounds instead of 84, but 35 is completely fine to get the job done. And something that I find really interesting, which I think might be a bug, is if you look at the X-ray, these shells are huge. They're absolutely massive compared to the gun they're supposed to fit into, and when you compare it to the shells in the Churchill Mark VII that have exactly the same gun, what you will find is that the shells are a hell of a lot smaller on the Churchill, so I don't really know what's going there. This does mean that you have a larger ammo rack, but because it's in the bottom of your tank, generally people aren't going to penetrate the bottom of your tank, they're going to shoot your turret. And that is the issue with this tank. What I would like to have in-game is something like a T29, something that, or the T32, something that has some good turret armor that you can fight with, and you can hide the glacis. Where the Excelsior shines when it comes to its armor is its sides. Its tracks eat basically everything. The lower glacis eats everything, going at nearly over 200 millimeters of effective armor. The front plate at 115 millimeters armor, and the turret front plate at 114 millimeters of armor flat, so there's no real bouncing or anything like that. That's what's going to let you down. And also it does have weak spots. The machine gun port on the hull, which is actually operational, this thing has 2 machine guns working at once. Now this is something that Gaijin have talked about in the past that they do want to do, so it's nice to see that on some of the newer editions they have started adding the hull mounted machine guns to work, such as on the Japanese and now on the Excelsior. But that machine gun port on the hull is a massive weak spot. You need 63.5mm of penetration to get through it, so if you're in a T-34-76 and you're struggling against this thing, shoot it there. If you can't see that, well, just shoot the gun mantlets. The one great thing about the Matilda is that the breech of the gun actually takes up a large amount of the turret. That cannot be said by the Excelsior. If you shoot in that breech area, generally you're going to kill everyone in the turret. But can this thing take a shot? Yes, it can. If it gets shot at an angle, you can angle it pretty well, apart from that flat turret. And the thing is, you will generally not get killed by one shot. Because this thing has 5 crew, and they are relatively spaced out, and you're not coming up against 88s, because at 4.0 you cannot face Tigers or anything like that. The most you're going to come up against is the 88mm flak trucks. But what will happen is they will pen your turrets, they will kill your 3 people inside of it, and that actually leaves you with 2 crews, so you don't just get automatically knocked out. One of the biggest issues I have personally with a lot of these British tanks is the fact that they have 3 men in the turret and 1 man driving, no hull machine gunner. So what happens is once you get shot once, you're dead. And the reason why I kind of like the Churchills is the same reason. They have that 5 crew. Does it have a big arse that you can shoot and destroy the engine and everything like that? Yes, of course it does. But it also has that spaced armor on the side. You have to get through, first of all, 25.4mm of armor. Then you've got to get through 20mm, which is part of the road wheels, or the road wheels themselves, which are 20mm. Then you've got to get through 39mm, and then you're into the tank. So you've got to get through 3 layers if you're trying to shoot through the tracks. This means the way to play this tank is to actually angle it. So if you want to go around the corner, just stick your front out. Stick your tracks out. If they want to track you, fine. Then they're going to have to come at you. And if they try and come around you, you have wonderful turret traverse to get them. 22.3 degrees per second is amazing when it comes to it. If you're fighting up a hill, guess what? You've got negative 12 gun depression if you stick the gun straight ahead and down. If you put it to the sides, you're going to have slightly less, so that's something to consider. But stick your tracks out. If they shoot them, then you pop around the corner, shoot them back. If they knock your track off, just wait and farm points. That's all you have to do. But what separates this from every other heavy tank that the British have is the fact that it has that acceleration and has that speed. This is not a heavy tank, this is an up-armoured medium tank. There is no way you can convince me that this is a heavy tank. It doesn't really have the armour for it, apart from the spaced armour on the sides, but it has the speed of a medium tank. Now, where is another issue that it has? Obviously with the 75mm, it can get very frustrating for players, which I completely understand. When you're coming up against stuff like KV-1s, bouncy T-34s, it can be very frustrating using the 75mm for the British. But know that taking the M72 shot with 110mm of penetration, you should be able to pen whatever you come up against. And because it's going to take them a long time to take you down, you're generally going to be able to get more than 1 shot off, instead of being sat in a Cromwell getting 1 shot, or a Comet getting 1 shot. In this thing, you are going to at least take a hit. Another kind of unsung thing about these vehicles that can take a lot of hits is, if you're in realistic battles, it basically means that if you take more hits, you get more spawn points. even though you are going in a heavy tank straight away, so you do have to use more spawn points to actually use the heavy tank, if you get hit a lot, then you'll get more spawn points, which means that you'll get into the air easier. Because of its quick speed, it also means that you can generally get to the first cap points before everybody else, or the majority of your team, gaining points from that, and because it's premium, you get the premium bonus on it. Isn't that absolutely lovely? One of the massive issues, though, is an issue that all British tanks have, but it is amplified for the Excelsior for some reason. The reverse gear in this tank must consist of the driver getting out of the front of the tank and trying to push it backwards. It goes at a maximum of -2 kilometers an hour backwards, when it can go 38 kilometers forwards in the space of maybe 5 seconds of accelerating, but it can only go a maximum of 2 kilometers an hour backwards. You can see the issue that you may run into a lot in this tank, which is the fact that you're going to get yourself into situations incredibly quickly, and getting yourself out, well, it's not going to be so easy. So you've got to plan ahead, obviously, and because you're a big target, guess who likes you as well? Bombers, and attackers and fighters, but that's just something you're going to have to deal with. It's the same issue that the Churchill has. I wish that this was tier 4, but I know for a fact it's never going to be near tier 4. The lowest tier 4 we have in game right now when it comes to the British is the Crusader AA Mark 1, which is sat at 4.7, and disregarding that as AA, the next one is 5.7, but still a solid tier 3 premium vehicle will mean that grinding out the tree will be a hell of a lot easier to do. I've already ground out half of the FV4202, which before I hadn't even started it, because I just finished the Centurion, just in a few games in this thing. And overall, it's not just that it is combat effective. It's not just that, even though the 75 can feel a bit weak, it does well against the Germans, it does well against the Japanese, it struggles against the Russians. It's not the fact that the armor can sometimes, or most of the time, bounce shots as long as it's not on those flat plates or at the weak spots. It's the fact that this tank is fun to play. With the crazy gun depression looking forward, with the fact that you have these humongous tracks, with the fact that it can go 38 kilometers an hour, it means that you can get yourself in positions that you could never do in something like a Churchill, and you could bounce shots at the same time. And also the fact that you get it fully upgraded at the start helps quite a lot, but also the fact that you can turn the turret so quickly, the fact that your reload is 6 seconds, so if you do cock up a shot, you're generally going to reload faster than most of the stuff you're going to face. So yeah, even though this tank may not be the prettiest, it definitely isn't. Even though it has the stereotypical British flaws of flat armor and not a great gun, but maybe decent at supporting infantry, even though it has no reverse gear, overall it is enjoyable to play. And I know for a fact, even though it may not be the best tank I can use, maybe I'd probably take the Achilles over this thing. I know for a fact that I'm going to use this a lot more, just because I find it really fun to play. And just as a little side note, you'll see in the video that all of the guns are on top of the Excelsior. I did put them there as decorations. They don't come there with the tank. I just thought it looked really cool, so yeah, enjoy that. A little tidbit as well, if this tank gets blown up, the guns stay there, so you just get some alien floating guns, so just remember that. A typical sign of a British tank is the fact that it has a gun, which means that it can't penetrate itself, and the Excelsior is no different. I hope you enjoy this video, and there will be a follow-up video on the War Thunder Chronicles and my thoughts and changes looking at the future, just to see what we can do to try and improve it. But overall, I'm happy I did them. The Excelsior is the perfect tank, in my opinion, for what a gift tank should be. Something different, something not overpowered, something just fun to use. A quick, heavy tank with you know, not crazy armor, but decent enough armor, decent enough traverse, and then has some few issues with it. It's great. I'll catch you next time.